In 2003, a chilling event shook the small town of Westfield, Indiana. 15-year-old Emma Wilson, while returning home late one evening through a wooded park area, became the victim of a brutal attack. This area was considered quiet and safe, with many locals having no reservations about allowing their children to be out in the evening hours. Emma often used this path as a shortcut to get home, and on that evening, nothing seemed amiss. When Emma didn't return home at her usual time, her parents immediately grew worried. Her father, Thomas Wilson, began searching for her right away. He contacted her friends and neighbors, but no one knew where she might be. Understanding that the forest path might have been Emma's route, Thomas, armed with a flashlight, set out to search for her. He knew that the forest could be a dangerous place after dark. After about 2 hours in the thick darkness of the forest, Thomas stumbled upon his daughter. She was lying unconscious on the ground, covered in blood. There were signs of a struggle all around her. Bushes and grass were trampled and uprooted as if someone or something had violently pushed or dragged her. Emma's body bore deep wounds that appeared to have been inflicted by the claws or teeth of a large animal. Her clothes were torn, and her skin was marked with bruises and cuts. Thomas immediately called for an ambulance. Emma was rushed to the nearest hospital, where doctors fought desperately to save her life. She was in critical condition, multiple fractures, deep cuts, and shock from hypothermia. Despite the severity of her injuries, Emma survived. However, she was never able to remember what had happened that night as she passed through the forest. The police launched an investigation right away. They considered the possibility of an attack by wild animals, such as coyotes or bears, but none of these theories held up. No animal tracks were found at the scene, which was strange given the violence of the attack. There were also no traces indicating human presence, which ruled out the possibility of a crime committed by a person. Despite the police's efforts, the culprit was never found. This case was the first in a series of mysterious attacks that began occurring in the area. Locals, who previously felt safe, became more cautious. Parents started keeping a closer watch on their children, and the wooded park area, once a popular spot for walks, became a dark and ominous place that few dared to enter. Emma Wilson survived, but the injuries she sustained changed her life forever. She never returned to the forest and avoided places where she might feel threatened. In 2004, in the suburb of Greendale, Ohio, an incident occurred that not only shocked the local residents but also attracted national news coverage. Matthew Johnson, a 3-year-old boy, was playing in his yard under the supervision of his mother when he was suddenly attacked by something strange and terrifying. It was an ordinary summer day. Matthew was riding his small bicycle down the driveway, enjoying the clear weather. His mother, Jenny Johnson, was working in the garden, occasionally glancing at her son. The yard was surrounded by a high fence, and the family always considered it a safe place for play. But the tranquility of that day was shattered in an instant. Jenny heard a strange noise, as if something or someone was breaking branches, followed by a loud and piercing scream from her son. In a panic, she rushed to Matthew, and what she saw made her freeze in horror. The boy was lying on the ground, his bicycle overturned, and his body bore deep wounds as if inflicted by enormous claws. Matthew screamed in pain and fear, and Jenny, without wasting any time, grabbed him in her arms and ran into the house. She immediately called for an ambulance. The doctors arrived within minutes, but the boy's condition was critical. He was rushed to the hospital, where surgeons fought to save his life. Meanwhile, the police began an investigation. Experts were called to the scene to thoroughly examine the yard, but what they found only raised more questions. Huge footprints were visible on the ground, resembling those of a large animal, but no known local predators could have left such tracks or inflicted such injuries. That same evening, another event intensified the panic among Greendale residents. In a neighboring yard, 4 dogs were found dead. Their bodies were mutilated beyond recognition, and the wounds resembled those inflicted on Matthew. Everything indicated that whatever had attacked wasn't an ordinary animal, but something more horrifying and unknown. Despite the police and experts' efforts, no one could explain what had happened that day. The theory of a wild dog pack attack was quickly dismissed due to the lack of evidence of these animals, and other hypotheses seemed too far-fetched to be taken seriously. Matthew Johnson survived, but his life was forever changed. He spent several months in the hospital, undergoing multiple surgeries. While his physical condition gradually improved, the psychological trauma stayed with him for life. His mother, Jenny, sold the house and left Greendale, unable to bear living in a place where such a terrible tragedy had occurred. This case became one of many unexplained attacks that began happening in various parts of the country. Rumors of a mysterious creature, half human, half beast, spread among the locals. No one could give a definitive explanation for these events. In 2006, in the small town of Fairview, Missouri, an event occurred that shocked not only the local community, but also attracted the attention of federal authorities. Reverend Jack Reynolds, a respected pastor, was found dead in his dog shelter, where he cared for stray animals. Reynolds was known for his kindness and dedication to helping those in need. The dog shelter he founded on the church grounds had become a home for dozens of animals until they could find new owners. Locals often saw him walking with his charges through the streets of Fairview and respected him for his selflessness and care. On that fateful day, the Reverend didn't show up for the morning service, which was completely out of character for him. The parishioners grew concerned and decided to check his house, which was located right on the church grounds. When they entered the shelter, what they saw would stay with them forever. John Reynolds's body lay on the ground, surrounded by his own dogs. His body bore deep wounds resembling bites or scratches, but far larger and more brutal than those an ordinary predator could inflict. The kennel was drenched in blood, and even the most aggressive of his dogs appeared frightened and nervous, which was unusual for animals accustomed to the peace and care Reynolds provided. The police immediately cordoned off the scene and began an investigation. However, as in previous cases of unexplained attacks, they couldn't find any explanation for what had happened. The initial assumption that the pastor had been attacked by his own dogs was quickly dismissed. The dogs had been found tied up, and no one could believe that the animals Reynolds had so lovingly cared for could have turned on him. The tracks found at the scene only added to the confusion. They resembled large paw prints, but the shape and size didn't match any known animal. Wildlife experts brought in to investigate were unable to provide a definitive answer as to what or who could have inflicted such injuries. The locals began to panic. Rumors of a mystical creature, half man, half wolf, began to spread through the town, just as had happened in other parts of the country. People stopped going out at night, started locking their homes with every possible lock, and avoided talking about what had happened. The church where Reynolds served closed down, and the dog shelter was abandoned. The town fell into an atmosphere of fear and despair. Federal agents who arrived at the scene made no public statements, which only heightened the panic among the population. This case became yet another piece of the dark puzzle that no one could solve. What exactly attacked Reverend Reynolds that day, and what its origins were, remained unknown. In 2007, on the territory of the Black River Indian Reservation in Montana, an event occurred that caused concern among the locals and attracted media attention. Dean Lynn Calando Tavonis, a 40-year-old woman, was found dead on the outskirts of her home. The circumstances of her death were so strange and frightening that they shocked not only the local population, but also law enforcement. Dean Lynn was known in her community as a respected and peaceful woman, devoted to the traditions and cultural practices of her people. She lived alone in a small house at the foot of the mountains and had always been closely connected to the nature that surrounded her since childhood. She gathered medicinal herbs, practiced crafts, and actively participated in her tribe's rituals. On that fateful day, Dean Lynn didn't show up for a traditional tribal gathering, which was unusual for her. Her neighbor, Ira Blackhawk, decided to check on her at home to make sure everything was all right. When he approached the house, he was overcome with a strange sense of foreboding. The door was slightly ajar, immediately raising his suspicions. Ira entered and was met with a sharp smell that immediately signaled something was wrong. He found Dean Lynn in the backyard, at the base of a large oak tree she often visited for rituals. Her body was mutilated beyond recognition. Deep wounds and marks on her body indicated that she had been attacked by something with immense physical strength. Local authorities arrived at the scene and began an investigation. However, what they found didn't fit within the bounds of ordinary explanations. The marks left on Dean Lynn's body resembled bites and scratches from a large animal, but there was no evidence of a bear or any other predator in the area. Moreover, some of the tracks looked as if they had been made by a bipedal creature, further complicating the investigators' task. The local community began spreading rumors that the attack was connected to the tribe's ancient legends. These legends spoke of a creature, half human, half beast, that lived in the mountains and guarded its territory from intruders. The tribe's elders, upon hearing what had happened, performed purification rituals and prayed for protection from an evil spirit. The police, unable to find a reasonable explanation, handed the case over to federal authorities. However, the results of their investigation were never made public, which spawned numerous theories and speculations. The local population began to suspect that the authorities were hiding the truth, which only deepened their fears. Over time, the Black River Reservation began to empty. People started leaving their homes, unwilling to remain in a place where such a terrifying event had occurred. The legends of the creature attacking people were revived, and now no one doubted that the old tribal tales had a real basis. Dean Lynn Calando Tavonis became one of the victims of this mysterious entity, but her story, like the stories of other victims, remained unsolved. In 2009, in the small town of Clarksville, Tennessee, a series of mysterious and terrifying attacks took place, causing alarm and fear among the local residents. The attacks were so brutal and inexplicable that even experienced investigators and wildlife experts were at a loss to find a logical explanation. The first attack occurred in the spring of that year. The Bates family, who lived on the outskirts of town, discovered their pets, a dog and 2 cats, brutally killed in their backyard. The animals' bodies were so badly mutilated that it was impossible to immediately determine what kind of predator could have inflicted such injuries. The family was in shock, especially considering that their yard was surrounded by a high fence, through which no known predator could have entered. The local police arrived at the scene and began an investigation. They thoroughly searched the entire area for traces of a large animal but found nothing to indicate its presence. The veterinarian who examined the animals' bodies was stunned by the nature of the wounds. He stated that he had never seen anything like it in all his years of practice. A few weeks after this incident, another attack occurred. this time on the other side of town. John Harris, a farmer, found his sheep brutally killed in their pen. As in the previous case, the animals' bodies bore deep wounds resembling bites or claws from a large beast, but no trace of the beast itself was found. The pen was securely closed, and there were no signs that the gates had been forced open. The residents of Clarksville began to panic. Rumors of a mystical creature attacking animals quickly spread throughout the town. People became afraid to go outside after dark, and those with pets kept them indoors, not letting them out even during the day. The police and wildlife experts sought help from state agencies, but they too could offer no explanation. There were theories that the attacks could have been the work of a person, but this hypothesis was dismissed due to the lack of any signs of break-ins or human activity at the scenes. By the summer of that same year, as the attacks continued, residents began leaving the town. Some families simply couldn't cope with the constant fear and uncertainty. By the end of the year, Clarksville had become a ghost town, with only a few homes still inhabited. The authorities decided to close the case, stating that wild dogs were likely responsible for the attacks, despite the lack of convincing evidence. However, among the remaining residents, rumors began to circulate that the authorities were hiding the truth. Some believed that the attacks were the work of some unknown creature, perhaps an evolutionary descendant of ancient predators, or even something supernatural. These theories, although lacking any proof, became popular among those who stayed in the town. Over time, as with many other similar cases, the memory of the attacks began to fade. But the residents who survived the horror never forgot what happened in 2012. They knew one thing: whatever had attacked the animals in Clarksville couldn't be explained by the ordinary laws of nature. In 2010, in the quiet town of Edgewood, located in Georgia, an event occurred that not only shocked the local residents, but also attracted the interest of federal authorities. 81-year-old Natalie Adams, one of the oldest residents of this small town, was found dead in a ditch on the outskirts of town. The circumstances of her death were so mysterious that the investigation drew the attention of the FBI. Natalie Adams was known in Edgewood as a kind and friendly woman, always ready to help her neighbors. She lived alone in an old house surrounded by dense forests and often went for walks in the surrounding area. On that day, Natalie set out on her morning walk as usual, but she never returned home. When she didn't appear that evening, her neighbors grew concerned and called the police. The police began searching immediately. They knew the route Natalie usually took and decided to check it first. After several hours of searching, the elderly woman's body was discovered in a ditch not far from her home. She was lying on her back. Her clothes were torn, and her body bore signs of violence that defied explanation. Initially, the police suspected that a wild animal might have attacked her. However, after examining the scene, they found no tracks indicating the presence of a predator. Moreover, the nature of the injuries on Natalie's body was strange. Deep lacerations and scratches as if caused by claws or teeth. But no known animal could have inflicted such wounds. The lack of signs of a struggle and the strange position of the body also raised doubts about the theory of an animal attack. Finding no answers, the police turned to the FBI. Agents arrived in Edgewood a few days later and began their investigation. They thoroughly examined the scene, interviewed Natalie's neighbors and relatives, but no one could provide any useful information. The FBI found no evidence that could shed light on what had happened that day. Rumors of federal involvement quickly spread through the town. The local residents began forming their theories about what really happened to Natalie. Some believed that she had been attacked by a mystical creature from the legends of the region. Others suspected that her death was connected to some secret government experiment. no official explanations were ever given. The FBI closed the case after a few months, citing a lack of evidence, and left Edgewood, leaving the town's residents in confusion and fear. But for those who knew Natalie Adams, her death remained a mystery that no one could solve. Since then, Edgewood became a place many began to avoid. People were afraid to walk through the woods, especially alone. The legends of mystical creatures inhabiting the surrounding areas regained popularity, and many became convinced that Natalie's death was indeed tied to these ancient stories. Natalie Adams's story became yet another unsolved mystery in the series of strange and horrific events happening across the country. And although time passed and memories of her slowly faded, her death left a deep mark on the hearts of those who knew her and lived nearby. The residents of Edgewood continued to wonder what really happened on that fateful day, but they never found an answer. In 2011, a tragic incident occurred in the small town of Pinewood, Texas, that forever changed the lives of its residents. 59-year-old Christine Rollins, known for her kindness and care for her neighbors, was found dead near her rural home. Her death became another enigma in the series of unexplained attacks that were occurring across the country. Christine lived alone on a remote farm surrounded by fields and forests. She was known as someone who was always ready to help others. She often assisted her neighbors, looked after their children, and maintained order in the community. On that day, Christine, as usual, went for her morning walk around her farm to check on the gardens and ensure her small herd of goats was doing well. When Christine didn't return by lunchtime, her neighbor, George Miller, began to worry. He knew that she always returned on time and never stayed out without reason. George decided to go check if everything was all right. He walked around the farm but couldn't find Christine, so he headed toward the woods where she sometimes went for walks. After walking a few hundred meters into the woods, George came across a horrifying scene. Christine lay on the ground, motionless, showing clear signs of a violent death. Her clothes were torn, and her body was covered in deep wounds and scratches. But the strangest part was that there were no tracks nearby indicating the presence of a person or animal. George immediately called the police, and soon the area was cordoned off. The investigators who arrived at the scene were baffled by what they saw. The nature of the wounds on Christine's body indicated an attack by a large predator, but no evidence was found to support this theory. There were also no signs of a struggle, which made understanding what had happened even more difficult. When the locals learned of the tragedy, panic spread through the small town where everyone knew each other. Such a brutal and inexplicable death caused a wave of fear. People started locking themselves in their homes, avoiding evening walks, and limiting their time outdoors. Rumors of a mystical creature attacking people quickly spread, and everyone began forming their own theories about what had really happened to Christine. The police, unable to find convincing evidence, handed the case over to the FBI. The agents, after examining the scene and collected evidence, couldn't provide a definitive answer to what had killed Christine. As in other similar cases, the case was closed without any official explanation, only deepening the distrust and fear among Pinewood's residents. Over time, life in Pinewood slowly began to return to normal. But the memory of Christine Rollins and what happened to her remained fresh. People continued to fear for their safety, and every new attack happening in other parts of the country reignited waves of fear and discussion. Christine became another victim in the chain of mysterious deaths that no one could explain. The story of her life and death became a topic of discussion not only among the locals but also among those interested in unexplained phenomena. Many began to link these events with ancient legends and myths, trying to find answers in them about what lurks in the dark corners of nature and what truly threatens people. Christine Rollins was buried in the local cemetery, and almost all the town's residents attended her funeral. In 2013, deep in the state of Kentucky, an event occurred that once again made the entire country talk about mystical attacks on people. In the small town of Lakewood, known for its coal mines and dense forests, a 13-year-old boy named Corey Godsey was found dead. His death shocked and terrified the local residents, leaving many questions unanswered. Corey was an ordinary teenager who loved spending time outdoors, playing with friends, and exploring the surroundings of his hometown. Like many children in Lakewood, he often ventured into the forests surrounding the town to fish in the streams or climb trees. On that day, Corey and his friends decided to play hide-and-seek at an old mine that had long been abandoned. When Corey didn't return home by evening, his parents began to worry. They contacted his friends, but no one knew where he could be. The search began immediately. A group of volunteers and local police combed the forest and the mine's surroundings. Late at night, one of the searchers, Sheriff Thomas Carter, found Corey's body on the slope of an old coal pit. The boy lay on his back, his clothes torn, and his body mutilated beyond recognition. The marks on his body indicated an attack by a large animal. The bite marks on Corey's body were particularly strange. They varied in size and shape, which was highly unusual. It seemed as though he had been attacked by several different creatures simultaneously. But no one could understand how this could be possible. The police launched an investigation, but no clues that could explain what had happened were found. The wildlife experts brought in to examine the scene were baffled. They couldn't identify an animal capable of inflicting such wounds. There were no tracks, no fur, or any other evidence at the attack site that could help with the investigation. Meanwhile, a few miles from the scene, dead dogs were found at the old mine. Their bodies were also heavily mutilated, and they bore the same bite marks as those on Corey's body. This discovery only further confused the investigators and sparked panic among Lakewood's residents. Rumors of an attack by a mystical creature once again began to spread among the locals. People spoke of something living in the forests of Kentucky, something their ancestors knew about, but no one dared to speak about openly. The legends of strange creatures attacking people and animals, once considered mere ghost stories, were now taken seriously. The FBI, upon learning of the incident, joined the investigation. However, as in other similar cases, no concrete conclusions could be drawn. The case was closed with the official explanation being wild animal attack, although none of the experts could explain which animals could have committed such an attack. The town of Lakewood was shaken by this tragedy. The Godsey family moved to another state, unable to stay in a place where they had suffered such a terrible loss. The school where Corey studied closed for several weeks, and the children who lost their friend took a long time to return to their normal lives. This case became another mystery in the series of mysterious deaths occurring across the country. Corey Godsey's death became a symbol of fear of the unknown, and the residents of Lakewood, like many others, began avoiding forests and wild areas, fearing that the next attack could happen again. In 2015, in the rural area of Tennessee, strange and unexplained attacks began occurring, leading to severe injuries and even the deaths of several local residents. These events sparked panic among the population and left local authorities at a loss. The first attack happened early one spring morning when 45-year-old farmer James McMillan went to check on his property. His farm was located on the edge of a dense forest, and James always started his day by inspecting the fields and checking on his animals. That day, as usual, he headed to the pasture where his cows grazed. A few hours later, neighbors, noticing that James wasn't attending to his usual morning tasks, began to worry. His brother, Thomas McMillan, decided to check if everything was all right. He went to the pasture, and what he saw horrified him. James lay unconscious on the ground, his body covered in deep wounds as if he had been mauled by a large animal. Thomas called for an ambulance and the police. James was rushed to the hospital, where doctors found serious injuries, including multiple fractures and deep lacerations. He remained in critical condition for several weeks, but fortunately he survived. However, he could never remember what had happened to him that day. The police launched an investigation, but there were very few clues at the scene. The only thing they found was strange tracks on the ground that didn't match any known animal. The wildlife experts brought in to examine the scene couldn't provide any explanation either. None of them had ever seen anything like it in all their years of work. The attacks continued throughout the summer. Several residents of neighboring farms also fell victim to attacks. Each time, the injuries were similar: deep bites and scratches, like those from enormous claws or teeth, but without any signs of predators. The victims couldn't explain what had happened, as most of them lost consciousness during the attacks. Local residents began to fear for their lives. People stopped going outside after sunset, started fortifying their homes, and avoided socializing with neighbors. Rumors of a mystical creature attacking people quickly spread throughout the area. Some spoke of an ancient curse, while others linked these events to something supernatural. The FBI, learning of the strange attacks, intervened in the investigation. However, despite all their efforts, the agents couldn't find any concrete evidence or explanations for what was happening. The case was eventually closed without an official conclusion, which only intensified the fear among the local residents. By the end of the year, the attacks suddenly stopped, but the fear lingered. People in Tennessee continued to live with the feeling that the threat could return at any moment. Many farmers abandoned their land, leaving it deserted, while those who remained tried to avoid discussing the events that had transpired. This case became yet another dark chapter in the history of unexplained attacks happening across the country. The people of Tennessee didn't know what or who was behind these attacks, but one thing was clear: the fear of the unknown would haunt them for a long time. In early 2016, in the small town of Silver Creek, located in northern Idaho, an event occurred that added a new chapter to the series of mystical and unexplained deaths. This time, the victim was 19-year-old Carlon de la Cruz, whose tragic end triggered another wave of fear and confusion among the local residents. Carlon was a young, energetic guy who had recently graduated from high school and was planning to go to college. He was known for his love of nature and frequent hikes in the forests surrounding the town. On that fateful day, Carlon, as usual, went for a morning run along a forest trail that passed through dense woods and led to a small lake where he liked to relax and reflect. When Carlon didn't return home by lunchtime, his parents began to worry. They knew that their son always returned on time and never stayed out without reason. After waiting several hours, they decided to call the police. The search operation began immediately, and soon, at the place where Carlon often visited, his personal belongings were found scattered along the trail. The police continued their search deeper into the forest, and a few hours later, they stumbled upon Carlon's body. It lay at the base of a slope, surrounded by broken branches and shrubs. At first glance, it seemed that he had fallen and sustained fatal injuries, but a closer examination revealed something much more sinister. Carlon's body was covered in numerous wounds, deeply embedded in his flesh. The bite marks and scratches, similar to those left by large predators, indicated that he had been attacked. However, as in previous cases, no animal tracks that could have inflicted such injuries were found at the scene. Additionally, strange markings were found on Carlon's body, which no one could identify. The Idaho authorities immediately launched an investigation, but no explanations were found. Investigators interviewed everyone who knew Carlon, but no one could speculate on what might have happened. The FBI also got involved in the case, as it fit the pattern of unexplained deaths occurring across the country in recent years. The agents examined all the evidence and testimonies, but none of them could find any facts that would shed light on this mysterious death. Carlon was a healthy, athletic young man, and no one could have predicted that he would become the victim of such a brutal attack. Rumors of a mystical creature lurking in the forests of Idaho quickly spread among the residents of Silver Creek. People began to fear going outside, especially at night. Residents of forest homes started selling their properties and moving to other areas, far from the places where this tragedy occurred. The official cause of Carlon de la Cruz's death was listed as attack by an unknown predator, but none of the local residents believed this explanation. Everyone knew that no animals in Idaho could leave such marks. Something else, perhaps much more dangerous and mystical, was hiding in those forests. Carlon's death became the last straw in a series of strange and terrifying events happening across the country. The local residents continued to live in fear, knowing that the threat could still return. In 2018, after a series of mysterious attacks across the country, interest in these cases reached its peak. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, began taking a more active role in cases related to unexplained deaths, striving to uncover the mystery behind these horrifying events. However, each new investigation only deepened the mystery, providing no answers. For several months, FBI agents worked intensively on all the unsolved cases related to the mysterious attacks. They reviewed reports, interrogated witnesses, and examined crime scenes, but all efforts were in vain. The official explanations, such as wild animal attacks or accidents, satisfied neither the agents nor the local residents. Particular attention was drawn to a case from 2002, when a photograph was discovered in the forests of Illinois, capturing something many began calling the Dogman. The photograph was blurry, taken with an old film camera, but even this was enough to cause a sensation. It depicted a tall, bipedal creature with a muscular body covered in fur and a face resembling a wolf. This image became the subject of intense study, but no further evidence of its authenticity was found. The photograph and subsequent unexplained attacks prompted the FBI to seriously consider the possibility of a cryptid, a creature that was half human, half animal. Despite the fantastical nature of this hypothesis, it gained traction within the agency, as no other explanations matched the facts. But even with this assumption, no concrete steps could be taken. A significant link in this chain of events was the so-called bone graveyard discovered in the dense forests of Illinois. Local residents had long avoided this part of the forest, speaking of strange sounds and a constant feeling of being watched. In 2024, a group of researchers, stumbling upon this area by chance, found bones scattered everywhere. Some of them belonged to wild animals, but among them were also human remains. The remains were severely damaged, and the nature of the damage matched what had been documented in other cases of unexplained deaths. The FBI immediately took control of this case, but despite numerous examinations, no new evidence was uncovered. Local authorities and residents demanded answers but received none. Officials tried to reassure the public, stating that the investigation was ongoing, but in reality, no real progress was being made. In the end, by late 2024, the FBI closed all these cases with the label unsolvable. Within the agency, There were strong suspicions that something beyond scientific explanation was behind all these attacks, but without concrete evidence, the agents were left with no choice but to close the cases. These events left a lasting mark on the collective consciousness, fueling fear and speculation about what truly lurked in the shadows of America's wilderness. The legends and rumors of cryptids, ancient curses, and government cover-ups only grew in the years that followed, ensuring that the mystery would never fully fade from memory.
Story 2.
With the keys clasped tightly in my hands, the weight of history pressed upon me, an undeniable force that whispered tales of bygone splendor and lingering tragedy. The abandoned hotel, once a majestic sanctuary nestled in the arms of nature's embrace, now stood as a crumbling relic, its former glory eclipsed by the shadows of a haunting past. As I tread through the empty halls, my footsteps reverberated, echoing the silent lament of a place frozen in time. Once, this establishment was a beacon of prosperity, a testament to opulence set against a backdrop of mountains, forests, and rivers. Nature itself seemed to caress the hotel, inviting those in search of solace and joy. Yet, the cruel hands of fate had orchestrated a devastating symphony, and a fire a decade ago had transformed this sanctuary into a desolate testament to grief. The flames claimed the former owner, his family, and the devoted staff, turning what was once vibrant and alive into a despondent shell. Since that fateful day, the hotel had become an abandoned relic, a silent witness to the tragedy that unfolded within its walls. As I explored the decaying rooms, the air thick with the musty scent of decay, visions of restoration danced in my mind. Detailed blueprints unfolded, revealing a path toward resurrection. Each room held the potential to rise from the ashes, and I envisioned the day when the inn would open its doors once more, reclaiming its place in history. With ambition gleaming in my eyes and hope pulsating in my heart, I was determined to breathe new life into the dilapidated structure. The enormity of the task ahead didn't deter me. Instead, it fueled my resolve to revive the hotel and rewrite the narrative of its tragic past. The creaking doors echoed through the corridors as I made a pivotal decision. Restoration wasn't just about the physical structure. It was about reviving the very soul of the place. The key, I realized, lay in assembling a team that would infuse passion into every corner of this once majestic complex. I recognized that the success of the restoration hinged on the people I surrounded myself with. With a decisive spirit, I set out to build a team of professionals dedicated to resurrecting the hotel's former glory. Financial concerns loomed, but my passion for the hospitality business eclipsed any worries about material costs. My fortunate inheritance meant that money was not a stumbling block, and I resolved to invest every penny into realizing my long-held dream. This endeavor was not just a pursuit of profit. It was about creating a haven where every guest would bask in the warmth of home. In tandem with assessing financial investments, I meticulously contemplated the roster of staff that would breathe life back into the hotel. Taking on the role of manager, I aimed to immerse myself in every aspect of the business. The success of the endeavor rested on the shoulders of each team member. The list of positions seemed daunting, from receptionists to middle managers, customer service specialists to maids, cooks to waiters, and security and maintenance staff. Yet, I understood that each member would contribute something unique, transforming the hotel into more than a restored building, a true home for all who entered. The symphony of revival, I knew, would be orchestrated by the collective passion and dedication of the individuals who believed in the resurrection of this once majestic haven. 2 weeks later, I assembled a crew of builders and renovators and arrived at the hotel again to begin the restoration process. And the symphony of restoration was now playing its tune through the once silent halls of the hotel. My construction and renovation team, under my careful guidance, breathed life into the crumbling relic. The echoes of hammers and electric saws reverberated, creating a rhythmic soundtrack to the revival of the majestic sanctuary. I found myself engrossed in every detail, poring over blueprints and immersing myself in the intricacies of each room. This was not merely a project, it was a calling, a mission to resurrect not just the physical structure but the very soul of the place. I understood the gravity of the task and became a vigilant overseer, ensuring that every nuance of the restoration received the attention it deserved. One day, amidst the orchestrated chaos of construction, I stood over the blueprints, mapping out the future of the hotel. My dedication to the project was palpable, a commitment that went beyond the call of duty. It's not just about rebuilding walls, it's about breathing life back into every corner, I declared, my voice echoing through the empty halls. With those words, I symbolized the essence of our shared mission, a mission to transform a despondent shell into a vibrant haven. In the midst of our fervor for restoration, a peculiar discovery awaited us in the basement. A construction worker approached, a whisper of excitement in his eyes. He had stumbled upon an unusual hatch, tightly closed, an unexpected portal to the mysteries concealed beneath the hotel's foundations. Intrigued, I decided to investigate, and together with the worker, descended into the dimly lit depths. Using tools, the construction workers opened the hatch, revealing a spiral staircase leading even deeper down. An inexplicable chill coursed through the air as we descended, arriving in a spacious room resembling a cave of clay and stones, imbued with antiquity. The beam of our flashlights danced upon rust-covered surfaces, revealing the contours of an iron box melded into the clay wall. Its form suggested a time long past, and as we examined it, intricate drawings and inscriptions reminiscent of ancient runes adorned its surface. The atmosphere became charged with an eerie energy, as if the walls themselves whispered forgotten tales. Attempts to pry the box from its earthen prison proved futile. It seemed bound by more than just rust and clay, resisting our efforts to unveil its secrets. A decision was made to leave the mysterious box untouched until the renovations were complete, shrouding it in an air of anticipation. More than a week had passed since the discovery of the mysterious cave and the enigmatic box. The inn, under my relentless guidance, had undergone remarkable changes, transforming from a desolate relic to a beautiful haven. Living in a mobile home next to the inn, I dedicated every waking moment to the restoration process, watching with satisfaction as the grandeur of the establishment was reborn. Anticipation for the grand opening filled my thoughts. However, amid the joyous metamorphosis, a somber note pierced through. Bill, the construction crew leader, approached me with a grave countenance. His words hung heavy in the air as he delivered disturbing news. One of our workers had gone missing. Bill recounted that the worker was last seen leaving the construction site 2 days ago, heading home after his shift. Yet he never arrived home, nor did he return to work. The unsettling news cast a shadow over the inn's rebuilding process. Concern etched across my face. I listened intently as Bill continued. Bill reported that he had scoured the hotel and the surrounding area, discovering the missing construction worker's cell phone. The spouse, frantic with worry, had already contacted the police. The weight of the situation settled upon me, darkening the joy that had accompanied the restoration. I assured Bill that I had been present on the premises both day and night, diligently overseeing the restoration process. I hadn't noticed anything unusual after the construction workers' shift ended. Despite my frequent solitary walks through the hotel's corridors, I had not observed any unusual occurrences after the workers had left. Hope lingered in Bill's eyes as he expressed his wish for the missing man's swift return. With a heavy heart, he returned to his duties, focusing on the ongoing renovation. 2 days later, however, the specter of uncertainty returned. Another construction worker vanished, disappearing without a trace after completing his shift. The gravity of the situation deepened, casting a pall over the inn's atmosphere. Anxiety permeated the air, eclipsing the satisfaction of the ongoing transformation. Concerned murmurs circulated among the construction crew, and the once familiar halls now echoed with a disquieting unease. Bill, with furrowed brows, approached me again with the distressing news. The second missing worker's disappearance mirrored the previous incident, a departure from the construction site without a subsequent return home. Once more, a cell phone was found, left behind like an eerie breadcrumb. The police were now involved, delving into the unsettling mystery that veiled the inn's restoration. The police, clad in their solemn uniforms, arrived at the inn like harbingers of an unsettling truth. Their questions echoed through the halls, seeking answers to the mysterious disappearances of the construction workers. I, as the inn's owner, cooperated actively, guiding them through the labyrinthine corridors and assisting in the search for potential clues. Despite our collective efforts, the interviews yielded no leads, no evidence to unravel the enigma that veiled the inn. The police, frustrated by the absence of tangible findings, left, leaving the unsettling mystery unresolved. I, bound by the ongoing restoration, couldn't personally delve into the intricacies of the investigation at the police department. The inn, now a hive of construction activity, buzzed with the sounds of hammers and saws as the first phase of repairs and restoration neared completion. The dichotomy between the relentless work and the unresolved disappearances cast a disconcerting pall over the once celebrated transformation. I stayed on the premises, hope and unease coexisting within me. Each step carried the weight of responsibility, and every creak in the floorboards seemed to whisper secrets. The hotel, with its hidden cave and the mysterious box, harbored an inexplicable darkness. Plans for the second phase of renovation were underway, and the air buzzed with anticipation as Bill and I discussed details and plans. The inn, poised on the brink of a new chapter, held the promise of transformation. Little did we know, the impending revelation would shatter the thin veil between the known and the unknown. A construction worker, panic etched across his face, came hurtling towards us. Urgency hung thick in the air as he urgently beckoned us to follow. Without hesitation, Bill and I trailed behind, the corridor stretching ominously before us. The weight of uncertainty settled upon our shoulders, the echo of our footsteps resonating with an underlying disquiet. As we descended into the dimly lit basement, a gathering of builders stood in hushed conversation. The atmosphere was dense with foreboding. The worker who had led us pointed towards the hatch, a portal to the mysteries that lurked beneath the inn. The descent down the spiral staircase felt like a journey into the abyss. The air grew colder, and shadows danced along the walls, creating grotesque silhouettes. The flickering light offered glimpses of the cave, a space imbued with an ancient eeriness that intensified the sense of the unknown. The builders, huddled in a somber assembly, parted as Bill and I approached. A ghastly sight awaited us. The mangled corpse of a man lay amidst the subterranean darkness. Time seemed to freeze as the gravity of the discovery sank in. Bill, as if struck by an unseen force, froze in his tracks. A guttural cry escaped his lips, a primal sound that shattered the oppressive silence. "It's Daniel," he exclaimed, his voice carrying a blend of disbelief and horror. In that moment, the basement became a chamber of despair, the walls bearing witness to the unfolding tragedy. With a desperate urgency, Bill rushed towards the lifeless form of his younger brother. His cries reverberated through the cavernous space, a symphony of grief that echoed the inexplicable horror of the situation. "Call the doctors! Call the police! Someone, please help!" Bill's pleas cut through the stillness, a desperate plea for a lifeline in the face of an unthinkable loss. The builders, now witnesses to a scene of profound anguish, fumbled with their phones, dialing numbers with shaky hands. The basement, once a hidden realm, became a stage for a familial tragedy that transcended the boundaries of the living. As I stood amidst the unfolding sorrow, the builder who had led us to the grim discovery directed our attention to the mysterious box. Bricked up in the wall, it stood as a silent sentinel to the macabre scene. I approached it, the torn lid lying beside it like a sinister relic. The emptiness within mirrored the void left by Daniel's untimely demise. The police, clad in their authoritative blue, arrived swiftly, transforming the basement into a realm of investigation. Yellow tape cordoned off the site of Bill's younger brother's tragic demise, a grim reminder that the once hopeful inn had now become a scene of horror. Amidst the whispers of the investigators and the uneasy shuffling of the remaining construction workers, a heavy decree echoed through the dimly lit corridors. "Disperse to your homes," the police commanded, their voices cutting through the thick tension that hung in the air. The inn, once alive with the hum of restoration, now stood eerily silent. The investigators turned their attention to the mysterious box, examining it with a scrutiny that suggested they were grappling with forces beyond the realm of the rationale. The air in the basement seemed charged with an unsettling energy, a residue of the unknown that clung to every crevice. The directive was clear. No one was to enter the basement. The once bustling construction site fell into an eerie stillness as work on the hotel came to a grinding halt. The construction workers, already unnerved by the mysterious disappearances, had no desire to return to a place tainted by death. Caught in the web of uncertainty, I found myself at a crossroads. The dream of restoring the inn clashed with the grim reality that now shadowed its every corner. The reputation of the hotel, once a beacon of promise, had crumbled like ancient walls, leaving behind a haunted legacy. With a heavy heart, I made a difficult decision. The inn, once envisioned as a revived sanctuary, would be put up for sale. The notion of completing the renovation and reopening the hotel seemed futile, the lingering specter of tragedy dissuading any hopeful prospects. The construction workers dispersed, leaving behind the skeletal structure of halted dreams. The inn, once pulsating with the promise of new life, now stood as a mausoleum of shattered aspirations. Yet, despite the haunting pall that hung over the inn, I chose to remain in the mobile home near its grounds. The beauty of the place, now tainted by tragedy, still held a strange allure. I was hungry. It was gnawing at me from the inside out, and I couldn't leave it like that and just walk away. The hunger to witness the transformation persisted, even as the inn itself faced an uncertain fate. Late at night, as the shadows stretched their long fingers across the inn, I was jolted from the cusp of sleep by an ominous noise emanating from the hotel. Alarm coursed through my veins, compelling me to investigate the unsettling disturbance. Armed with a flashlight, I treaded the corridors, each step resonating with the regret of misplaced dreams. The inn had transformed in ways unimaginable. The once weathered walls stood proud in their newfound glory, adorned with chandeliers that cast an ethereal glow. Rooms once filled with decay now boasted new furniture that whispered tales of an unseen hand guiding the metamorphosis. Regret clawed at me, regret for pouring heart and fortune into a venture that now seemed like a futile pursuit. As I wandered through the opulent halls, the noise persisted, a haunting melody that seemed to emanate from the depths below. It led me to the basement, a place that had become a nexus of tragedy and inexplicable occurrences. The weight of wasted time bore down on me, each step a testament to the futility of my endeavors. The noise grew clearer as I approached the cellar. A cacophony of indistinct murmurs and rustlings reverberated, creating an unsettling symphony that resonated with the darkened corridors. With a deep breath, I mustered the courage to confront the source of the disturbance. The cellar door swung open, revealing a void that seemed to devour the feeble light of my flashlight. "Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice echoing through the subterranean silence. No response greeted me, only the chilling stillness of the basement. Undeterred, I descended into the abyss, my senses heightened and alert to the unknown that lurked in the shadows. The hatch, once tightly sealed, stood ajar once again. The noise ceased as I approached, leaving an eerie silence that hung thick in the air. A sudden movement startled me. A head emerged from the hatch, followed by the figure of a man. Recognition struck like a bolt of lightning. It was Bill. His disheveled appearance, haunted eyes reflecting sorrow and madness, sent shivers down my spine. The man before me was a mere semblance of the Bill I once knew. "Why are you here, Bill?" I inquired, my voice tinged with a mixture of concern and disbelief. Bill's response cut through the stillness like a knife. "Revenge," he uttered, his words laden with a weight that transcended the physical realm. Bill's eyes bore into mine, a maelstrom of emotion swirling within their depths. He spoke of the evil unleashed from the depths of the hatch, an evil that claimed the lives of construction workers, and most painfully, his own brother. Bill's conviction painted a narrative of malevolence that defied reason. In his hands, Bill clutched dynamite, a chilling revelation that sent shockwaves through the recesses of my mind. The intention was clear: to obliterate the inn, to purge the malevolence that festered within its walls. As the gravity of Bill's words settled, I stood frozen, grappling with the decision that loomed before me. Bill's eyes, clouded by a madness born of grief, held a dangerous spark that cautioned against defiance. I chose to tread cautiously, my instincts urging restraint in the face of a brewing storm. Silence loomed heavy in the basement as Bill continued his grim task of arranging the dynamite, transforming the once hallowed space into a chamber of impending destruction. My gaze remained fixed on the volatile arsenal, the weight of the situation pressing down on me like a leaden shroud. Despite the urgent need to intervene, a primal instinct urged caution. Bill, consumed by desperation and a thirst for retribution, seemed to teeter on the precipice of madness. Engaging him in conversation seemed the only thread to tether him from the brink. "Bill," I began cautiously, my voice breaking the silence that enveloped us. "We can't resort to this without understanding why. Tell me, why do you believe evil resides in this basement?" Bill paused, his eyes meeting mine, filled with a mixture of dread and conviction. He spoke of events a decade past, events that went beyond the tragic fire that had scarred this place. According to him, former employees, survivors of that fateful time, spoke of encounters with malevolent forces. "The fire is only his part of the story, really," Bill explained, his voice a low murmur in the eerie stillness. "The former owner, he found a treasure beneath this very ground, Used the money to build this place? But there's more down there, hidden. Something terrible that guarded that treasure. Evil that destroyed the owner's family and him. Martin, it's awakened again, Bill continued, a tremor in his voice. And we have to stop it before it consumes everything. The evil, it's here, and it's real. His words hung in the air, and for a moment, I found myself entranced by the narrative. Without uttering a word, I picked up the explosives, the cold metal pressing against my palms. I started helping Bill lay out the explosives in the basement. The dim light in the basement flickered, casting dancing shadows on the worn-out walls as Bill stood, mouth agape, staring at me in disbelief. He couldn't comprehend why I, the owner of the hotel, was actively assisting in the destruction of my own establishment. "Why, Martin?" Bill stammered, his voice tinged with confusion. "Why are you helping destroy your own hotel?" I shrugged, the weight of the past and the present converging on me. "It's high time to be rid of this place," I replied, my tone distant. "I love it here. The forest, the mountains, the rivers. But it used to be much more interesting." Bill, still processing my unexpected admission, urged me to explain further. With a heavy sigh, I delved into the distant past, revealing a history entwined with the very fabric of the hotel and the land it stood upon. "When I first came here 300 years ago," I began, memories of a bygone era flashing before my eyes. "There was a small hut that welcomed travelers. The land was untamed with fewer people. That's when I got the urge to go into the hotel business." A wistful look crossed my face as I recounted the inception of my dream. A dream that had been disrupted by an unforeseen twist of fate. I fell asleep, and when I woke up, someone had torn down the beautiful cabin on the mountain and erected this building without even consulting me, I continued, bitterness creeping into my voice. They disposed of my inheritance, my treasure. I had to take matters into my own hands. Bill's shock lingered as I shared the darker aspects of my history. I admitted to succumbing to a primal hunger, consuming those who dared to infringe upon what was rightfully mine. I had to eat those impertinent people, I confessed, my eyes locking with Bill's. But then I traveled, and when I returned, I wanted to fulfill my dream again. Yet my own stupidity and hunger led me to sin once more. I ate a couple of people, and your brother, he showed up, well, when I was busy. Sorry. Bill, still grappling with the revelation, attempted to speak. But before he could utter a word, a sudden transformation overcame me. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy as my form shifted, the bones in my body rearranging themselves with an audible crack. In the blink of an eye, I became a creature of the night, a werewolf. My snarling visage and razor-sharp claws replaced the image of the innkeeper that Bill had known just moments before. A gasp escaped Bill's lips as he stumbled backward, the realization of the supernatural horror before him settling like a heavy fog. Before he could react, I seized him, my lupine strength dragging him down the spiral staircase and into the hidden cave below. The cave, a forgotten chamber beneath the hotel, echoed with the sound of dripping water and the distant howls of the wind. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and ancient symbols adorned the walls, telling a story of a time long before the hotel stood above.